Hi, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Whether you're tuning in on our podcast or on our live stream, I'm really excited to have you here tonight with us as we interview Allie Henny. The interview was titled Her Roots, which is a little bit of a ripoff of Allie's podcast, which is called Combing the Roots. I won't get a lot into who Allie Henny is because that's kind of what the interview is about, but I will say thank you very much to my co-host for this episode, Belisha Beacon. And I wanted to let all of you know that this interview came about because of Belisha, as a member of our editorial board, said, hey, I'm a really big fan of this social media poster. Can you have her on? And I got her on. It was really exciting for me, one, to meet somebody new and to do a great interview, but also to be able to, hook an editorial board member up with an opportunity to meet somebody that she respects and admires. I think that comes through in the interview. I think the interview was fantastic, and I'm really proud of it. So before we get started, I want you to take a minute, go to www.njrevolutionradio.com and think about becoming an editorial board member. You can make a donation there. You can check out our other podcasts. You can look at the Ida Vox report. We have a lot going on at Revolution Radio, and you can help make it happen. These are activists and grassroots type things that we focus on. It's not NBC. It's not CNN. It's not Fox. It's definitely not Fox. So why not become a part of this? Why not suggest and record your own interviews with us? Why not create your own media? I mean, we hear a lot of complaining on the left about we don't have enough media, or the media is slanted this way or that way. Well, take the bull by the horns, come here, join our editorial board, and create your own media. You can go once again to www.njrevolutionradio.com. Stands for New Journalism, revolutionradio.com. Even though we came out in New Jersey, it still stands for New Journalism. Just remember that, njrevolutionradio.com. Check out our editorial board. Check out all our other features. And now, without further delay, we bring you our interview with Allie Henny. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you again real soon for an interview with Margaret Kimberly. Stay tuned. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. My name is Brian Powers, and tonight we have a very special guest joining us, and plus a editorial board member, Belisha Beacon. She's been on before. She's done movie reviews, but she hasn't been on for a couple months because she was getting married and stuff. She's probably going to be taking over a lot of this interview tonight, so I want to thank her for helping both to set up this interview, to getting me acquainted with Allie and her work. And so I want to thank her, bring her in for a minute. She's also going to take over because, my internet, as you guys know, kind of comes and goes a little bit during these things. So it's good to have some backup. But tonight we're going to be interviewing a content creator, Allie Henny. She does podcasting. She has a huge Facebook following, and I'm sure she does other mediums as well. She's going to talk to us about all that. But first, let me bring in Belisha to say hi from Florida. What's up, sister? How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you.
Cool. So we're going to be interviewing somebody because you brought our attention to her. So before we bring her on and let her introduce herself, I wanted to give you a chance here today to say, why you're a fan of Allie's and why you said, hey, Brian, you should bring her on the show.
Yeah, I'm an avid social media user. For better or for worse. And Allie's content is always given me a lot of clarity surrounding some really tough issues. And I always look forward to hearing what she has to say about current events and helping me make sense of what's going on in the world when I'm having anxiety and trouble doing so myself. So I'm excited to have her on.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. So with no further ado, let's bring in Allie Henny. Allie, thank you for joining us here on Revolution Radio. And it's really nice to meet you. We booked this interview quite a while ago, so we had a lot of time to get excited about it and prepare for it. It's nice to finally be here with you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, it was. This has been on the schedule for a long time. I know. I've been looking forward to it, and I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's get started by having you tell us what you do. I mean, you do a few different things. You're a creative person. How do you define your work in the activist world or creative world?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I think that I sometimes, I guess, really struggle to define what I do. So by trade, I am a minister. I'm a Christian minister. That's what I had spent a lot of my adult life doing. That's like the sphere that I worked in, working with different Christian churches and nonprofits and that sort of thing. And that sort of meshed with being a writer. Writing is something, since I could write, I wrote, if that makes sense at all. Since I had the ability to know how to put words on a paper, I wrote things like stories, just different things and stuff like that. And even before I could actually physically write, like in my imagination, like I would tell myself stories. I would think about things. I would mull over that type of stuff. Um, and so yeah, so my life just kind of, I guess, converged between my work in the faith-based sphere and doing theology. I have a master of divinity, so doing theology, doing anti-racism work, writing, just several different things kind of all at once, and they all kind of converge into me and into kind of what I am. And so it's a little bit hard to define. If somebody out there comes up with like a good label or title or something like that for me, for what I do, um, I will absolutely, certainly take that and be happy and be like, hey, yeah, thank you for defining for me what I do, because what is my life? Like, what is it? I don't know. But anyway.
Well, certainly you speak mostly on racial issues. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I do a lot of writing in that sphere. We mentioned my earlier in the broadcast, mentioned that I have a Facebook following. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. I'm on TikTok too. I feel kind of like an old person over there. Like I feel so old. I'm just like on here,
Yeah,
and
me too.
occasionally I'll make a TikTok, and it's like, oh, okay, cool, people watch this. Wow. I enjoy scrolling TikToks. I feel like the millennial, like the elder millennial lurker that's there, like looking at the TikToks and everything. And that's kind of what I do. But anyway, so yeah, so a lot of how I guess I've come to people's public attention or whatever is through my Facebook page. That's just a writer's page. It's me, my name. I'm out there. Giving takes on things. And so it was really kind of encouraging to hear, whenever you're feeling anxiety about things, or you want to know, have a good take about something, me being a source of thought and how to think on that. And that's kind of, I guess, where I kind of have landed, is kind of content creator, thought leader, influencer. It's kind of just it's weird out there.
I would definitely place all of those labels on you for sure.
Where did you grow up at? Did you grow up as a person of faith, or did you find activism later in life?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small rural Missouri town. I'm from the country girl. I lived in a town. My husband, actually, I married into a farm family. My husband, his family, he's the first generation in like six generations to not farm. He's the first one to not be a farmer. But everyone on his side of the family was all farmers and everything. And so on his dad's side of the family, we're all farmers. And so I kind of, just grew up in a small farm community, kind of, in the Bible Belt, Missouri, Midwest, Bible Belt, that whole deal. So faith was something that was always important to me. And I qualify that with, I grew up in the Black church. And so I grew up in the Black church tradition. I started out going to a little Black Baptist church in the town that I lived in. And then whenever I was in middle school and high school, my family started attending a Pentecostal church in the next kind of major town over. We started going there. But those were all predominantly Black churches. And the reason why I make that qualification is because the Black church is different than white churches. And like, you know, white Christian churches, now you get some of like the more kind of like mainline, like quote unquote, like liberal churches that will be a little bit more social justice or whatever oriented, but it's almost like is a conscious thing that white Christians have to choose. In the Black church, like really, it varies by degree, of course, but there is a heart within that preaching tradition, within that Christian tradition, that is toward justice, that's toward activism, toward taking care of one another. In fact, where I grew up, town was greater than 90% white. We had a very small Black community, but the church was a center and a fixture of the community. But not everybody like necessarily practiced Christianity or practiced their faith, but just the church was like a center of, we had a little fellowship hall that different people would rent out for their different people within our community would within the Black community would rent out or whatever for events. We would have things, we had something called like Park Day, which that's like a whole other thing that I could explain. But one of the days at Park Day, Sunday, was always a church service. And it was just something, so, you know, you're partying, you do whatever, you know, Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday, there's always kind of the pause for that. So faith was something, so all that to say is that faith was something that has always been part of my life. It's always, even whenever I wasn't necessarily connected to the institutional church, there were some moments in my upbringing in my childhood, teenage years, where we would have some distance from the house of worship, but we weren't away from our faith. And so my faith is something that is personal to me. It's something that I am not necessarily trying to like shove onto other people, like, oh, well, in order to do social justice right, you've got to become a Christian, and you got to
certainly, consuming your content, I would not have, I had no idea that you were, you know, a minister, you know, heavily involved in the church in that way.
Yeah, it's not something that I really like put, like, you know, trumpet out, especially like, I mean, it depends on the platform. There's different platforms, maybe like Instagram or Twitter, where maybe I say a little bit more about that type of stuff. But it's something that, you know, it's like my faith is personal to me. It's not something I'm like trying to, you know, shove it onto you, like, oh, because I feel like that maybe it's because I came up in the Bible Belt, but like there's this whole like idea of like, oh, people need to get saved, and like, so everything that we're gonna do, we're gonna like make it oriented toward, there's a moment when you can decide to get shaved. And like there's a dude, a guy who's I think he's maybe still Christian, I'm not really sure, but this dude came up with this term called Jesus juking, where it's like, or another way to think about it is like Jesus duping, where it's like you're going to have like the youth group's going to have a pizza party, and you invite your friends to the pizza party, and everybody comes to the pizza party, and then it's like,
everyone's having a good time.
And now here, I'm going to teach you a lesson out of the Bible. And here, you can accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and and it's like, and people are, you know, like crying over their pizza, like, oh, I didn't get, like, I don't like that's not really me. That's not really how I, you know, how I approach activism. But I say that, but my faith, the teachings of Jesus Christ are important to me. And I'm not saying that, you know, like I would be a trash person without the Bible. I feel like a lot of people are like, you know, I wouldn't know, like, you wouldn't know how to be a decent person. Like, like, you wouldn't, like, really?
I got that. Yeah. That's kind of where your passion for social justice was nurtured.
Yeah,
early
on.
It's
accurate to say that. Yeah,
I got that question. You talked about that in a podcast that you did, and it's still out there on Spotify. It might have been a couple of years ago. But you talked about experiencing racism in the church. And can you think back and remember when you were first consciously experienced racism?
Yeah. So the thing is that I've always known that I am Black. There's never been a time in my life where I didn't know that I was Black. And whenever I say that, I mean, I knew that my skin color was different than other people's skin color, than the other people in my hometown. I knew that I looked different. But with that, I also knew that my family, that we talk different, that we maybe watch different TV shows, that we ate different food. And I can't tell you how I acquired this knowledge. I just knew. I just like there's not a moment in time that I can go back to and point and say, oh, that's a point where like, oh, I've realized that I was Black. And to add on to that, to the point of your question, the N word was one of the first words that I learned how to read. I was an early reader, very, very early reader. My mom said that, like, you know, she was teaching me words. I could recognize words written on my family. My mom and I, well, my family traveled a lot because my dad was in the Air Force. And so sometimes like we would have to travel, not necessarily live, but travel different places, right? But my dad lived in Arkansas while my parents were together. My dad had to live in Arkansas because he was stationed in Arkansas, and so we would drive to Arkansas every weekend. And so on the road, my mom would teach me different like the names of different towns and stuff, and I would be able to identify them at 3.5 years old. So I bring that up to bring it to the point that I remember watching a talk show. It was probably like Sally Jesse Raphael or something like that back in like, you know, the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And the Klan was on there. And there was a thing, there was like an image that they showed that had the phrase "N-word go home" on it. And I knew the word go, I knew the word home, I knew how to read it, but I didn't know what the N word was exactly. And kind of as I'm looking at this, one of my aunts like reads it out, and I was like, oh, that's what that word was. But that wasn't the first time that I heard that word. I knew that the N word meant Black. I knew that it meant me. Now, of course, I think in my family, I had heard, you know, the A version and not the ER version, probably a little bit more, but I was aware of what that was, and I knew that it meant me. And I knew in watching that talk show that those people, that all the anger, like you could just feel like the energy was just anger, was just like whatever. And all of that, it just kind of coalesced. Like this is about me. Like these people that are wearing these funny white robes don't like people who look like me. And
yeah,
and
isn't it amazing how much airtime the Klan used to get?
Oh my gosh!
Then? I mean,
it's wild. It's absolutely wild.
Television was my babysitter, and I knew way too much about the Klan.
Yes, because they were everywhere. They were on
regular
Oprah.
TV.
Yes, they were on Oprah. They were on Geraldo. They were on Sally. They were on Donahue. They were everywhere. Yeah. Like why? Everywhere. Like why are y'all putting the Klan on TV?
Yeah.
After school, just out here. Like why are y'all doing that? But yeah, I don't know how old I was whenever I saw that. I was somewhere, because I mentioned that I started reading at about 3.5 years old, so I was somewhere probably between 3 and 5 years old whenever I encountered that. And then of course having experiences in school. I mean, the first time somebody called me an N-word and I heard it, I was 7. I was in first grade, and that was really just kind of something that for want of a better phrase, colored kind of just my existence growing up in a small town. I have a lot of good memories, had a lot of good friends, had a lot of positive memories. But looking back on my years growing up in rural Missouri, and then of course as an adult living in Southwest Missouri. I grew up outside of Kansas City. Then I moved to Southwest Missouri, and then I lived in Virginia for a while, and now I live in Chicago. And yeah, just having those experiences as a child, and then being able to kind of go through and kind of mark time throughout my life and say these are times when I've experienced this certain type of racism. And now I live in Chicago. I live on the South Side. I'm experiencing less of maybe like kind of the overt and covert racism, like what we would think about racism, and it's more of the institutional racism now that I see and experience. But it's something that's been there and has been with me my whole life, unfortunately. But I think a lot of people would probably attest to that.
You talked a little bit about your family. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. A lot of us have boomer parents, and it's difficult. We have to deal with their internalized misogyny and sometimes internalized racism.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, what kind of influence did your family have on you growing up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that my family had a tremendous influence on me. I had the privilege of growing up in what a lot of people call an extended family. So not only did I have my nuclear family, but I actually spent a lot of time, a significant amount of time with my grandmother, with aunts, uncles, cousins. My grandma's house was the center of everything while she was alive. She passed away whenever I was 12, but for the first 12 years of my life, my grandma's house was the center of everything in my family, and we would all have dinners. My mom had 6 siblings, and during my lifetime, I think 4 of them were alive for most of my growing up and stuff. 4 to 5 of them were alive for most of my growing up, and so then them and their kids, and play cousins, extended family, like people who are family but like not really family, all those people being around. That was just that
aren't really your aunt, but
yeah, like that sort of thing. So I mean, I grew up in a very loving family, and my parents divorced whenever I was 7. So I didn't really see a whole lot of my dad after they had gotten divorced whenever I was about 7. But outside of that, like, my family, tremendous influence. And so, but with that, I got to see and witness, and still get to see and witness and listen and learn from them, because my family, my parents are boomers. My parents were born in 1955 and 1956. And so my dad grew up in Pennsylvania. So some of his memories are a little bit different because, growing up in a different part of the country. But my mom grew up, went to high school in the same town that I grew up in, and then grew up in another town that was a little bit rural town that was smaller than where I grew up. And so we had a lot of the same types of formative experience. I have a sister who's 12 years older than me. She's a Gen Xer, and I'm an older millennial. She's a Gen Xer. My mom's a boomer. And then I have a niece who is like younger millennial, older Gen Z, and then a nephew who is Gen Z. And it's wild how like we all had the same experiences growing up. And so even though my mom was born in 1955, it's having like the same type of experiences with racism and stuff, it's wild that and even growing up, maybe my sister and I went to the same school. But my niece didn't go to the same school as me. She grew up in another part of Missouri, but we still had the same types of experiences and whatever. But my mom had several siblings who were older than her, and my mom's oldest sibling was born in like 1938 or something like that. So wow. Like silent generation. There's my grandma had kids over like a long stretch of time. She had 3 kids, and then had like a 13-year break, and then had like 4 more kids. Wow. And so yeah, like it's wild, right? And so like I have aunts, uncles who can remember well segregation and can remember. My mom doesn't necessarily. She remembers her school being integrated, but still, like, she knew. My mom describes it as there weren't signs up that were that said whites only or anything like that, but there were places that she knew she wasn't allowed to go into. My older aunts and uncles, my mom's like right in the middle. She's the oldest of the second set of kids, the second stream of five kids. But my aunt and her husband, who were older than that, and other kind of relatives that are of that generation, they remember well having to cross the street for white people. They remember segregation well. They remember not being able to get jobs and that type of stuff. And so I grew up. So all that to say that, I grew up hearing these stories and even seeing the lived experience in my lifetime of people experiencing racism, of people getting called names. I have an aunt who's a nurse who she was a home health nurse, and she went and visited someone, and this old lady would always talk about the darkies. Now, she's my complexion. My aunt's my complexion. But this woman would just sit there and just that's just to talk about darkies. And my aunt, had to provide for her health care. And they would have to go to people's houses, and there's a couple of Black nurses where my aunt worked, and they'd have to go to all these, prejudiced old white people's houses and care for them, a lot of them toward the end of their life, and hear stuff like that. And so I grew up hearing those stories, or people recounting their experiences to me. And that, I mean, white people, a lot of times, we're a topic of conversation, just the stuff that they would do, the different things that we would experience from them. And that was what informed me. And it nurtured my sense of there's stuff that is wrong in the world. And I think that you talk about like generational gaps and everything. And I would say that one of the bigger generational gaps, or one of the things I think that some of my younger family members, including myself, maybe have helped some of our older family members, in some of us, in understanding, is because they grew up during a time when stuff was very overt, when it was, you couldn't be in certain places, you couldn't go to certain places, you couldn't be around certain people would freely call you names and that type of stuff. We didn't grow up with that, but a lot of times, a lot of Black boomers think, well, I can walk down the street and not get called the N-word. You realize as a young person, well, I mean, they're not like calling me N-words as I walk down the street, but like, people are treating me weird at my job, and like people are touching my hair, and like that isn't somebody calling an N-word, but that still doesn't feel good. Like it still feels dehumanizing, or people say things,
or you're in the grocery store and people just expect you to move aside in the aisle.
Oh my gosh, yes.
These little microaggressions and these things that people aren't necessarily like doing these overt things, but that's definitely a problem, an issue that I find I have trouble also articulating with older people as well. But that's very interesting that you have this whole large gamut of generations and different experiences to draw from.
Who are you trying to reach with your content?
That's a good question. So the people that I'm trying to reach is a very specific audience, and it's Black people, Black women in particular. I'll say Black women and femmes, Black female identified people, just to make woman identified people, just to kind of make that abundantly clear, that people who identify as women, whatever. But then within that, also Black people who have spent a significant amount of time in white spaces around white people. And that's kind of the specific audience. And the mode, I guess, of what I do is I really try to write in a way that helps that particular demographic of people be able to have language for their experiences. And the reason why I do that is because for a very long time, racism was so incredibly normalized for me. In the first, I say the first 19 years of my life, but really it was the first 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 years of my life, and I'm 36 now. But heavily even in that first 19 years of my life, I really growing up in a small town, experiencing racism, seeing racism, being just acutely aware of all of the implications of racism on my body and on my existence and everything. For a very long time, I felt like that it was my job to manage the white people around me, and it was my job to manage their racism. And it was because I knew that if I brought up, "Hey, you're saying this and this is racist," I knew that they would get their feelings hurt. I didn't have language for that. I didn't know that's white. Well, they're experiencing white fragility, and here's why they're experiencing white fragility. I just knew instinctively if somebody says something, that like says like, "Oh, well, you're you don't act like other Black people." That's a microaggression. People wanting to touch my hair, that sort of stuff. I remember being in 8th grade and a girl sitting next to me in gym class. I was just sitting kind of, I think I had my hand, like this or whatever. And she exclaims loudly for the whole class to hear, "You're not cooked all the way." And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, you're not cooked all the way. And so she was talking about my hands. She didn't realize that my hands aren't, I guess, Black. I mean, they're darker than a lot of white people's. My hands aren't the same color on both sides. White people's hands aren't the same color on both sides. But anyway, it was like this big moment, and it was just like, oh my, and it was like, that's really weird. And so, to be in a moment like that and to not be like, "Okay, girl, you need to sit down and shut up." Like, you learn how, and there's tons of other things that have happened where you kind of learn how to manage people, and you kind of learn how to, and I say manage the people, but you're also protecting yourself. And so I learned, so it took me a very long time to learn to recognize, like, I don't have to do that. Now, I'm in saying that, like, oh, I'm managing these white people's feelings. It wasn't out of a sense of like, oh, well, I have to protect them, and it wasn't anything like that. I was mad about racism. I knew that people were racist. I just thought that was how it was, and I was just sort of like, this isn't ever going to change, because this is how it was. This is how it's been. This is how it always will be. And so then having a moment where I realized, well, like, no, it doesn't have to be this way, and I can actually use my words to make it not that way. I can actually tell people, no, you don't get to touch my hair. I have bodily autonomy.
Take your power back and
yes,
put it on them instead of having to do all this work yourself.
And exactly. And so there's a lot of Black people that it's like it's hard to describe, because it's like this weird thing, because it's like, you're not saying like, oh, well, you don't believe that you're inferior. You don't believe that you have to do these things. That you necessarily have to do these things because you're inferior. It's kind of a mode of self-protection, and it's a mode of just sort of like, for me, it was just literally like, this is just how my life has always been, has been managing white people's feelings. And then whenever I realized, like, hold on a second, like, I literally just had a moment that was like, wait a minute, I am like a grown person. Like, I have bills to pay. How am I going to let somebody's their asinine little opinion affect how I interact with them? Like, they can strap on their big boy, big girl, big them panties and deal with their
and
feelings.
acknowledge their childish behavior, their
Yes.
outlandish behavior and outlandish comments. Yeah, it's been reading your content has been empowering to me, although I'm not your specific target audience. But there are a lot of similarities with how, you know, with sexism and how,
Mhm.
women are treated, and kind of taking your power back and putting
Yes.
it back on the people who are making comments and, just making assumptions about you. Um, so yeah, that's very interesting. And it has been very empowering for me too, just kind of passively absorbing that, that, reading how you describe things and how you talk about these things. And, I've been able to apply that in other areas of my life as well.
Well, that's
And
great. That's
I'm
great.
sure tons of people in all kinds of situations as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I hear a lot of people give that feedback. I say, like I write for this specific demographic to give them language, but I hope that other people benefit from it too. I hope that other people
For
see
sure. I
themselves.
think so.
People from
Definitely.
a lot of things that I say, I think could easily be applied to gender. It could easily be applied to orientation. It could easily be applied to religious minorities. It could easily be applied to disability, because oppression is oppression, and there are kind of general principles, general ideas, general experiences that oppressed folks have. So wherever you're at whatever intersection you're at, because you might be white and cisgender but be disabled, and so you're experiencing oppression. You might be white, cisgender, heterosexual, and maybe you have your religious minority, you're part of a religious minority group or something like that. There's an experience of oppression that's there. And then there's some people that have lots of experiences, lots of intersections of marginalization. They're disabled, they're queer, they're from a racial minority. They live in the country versus living in the city. They don't have access to clean water, to all that other type of thing. And like I said, oppression is oppression. And I think that the way that we are able, something that's so important, is for people to be able to name their oppression. And sometimes it takes seeing and understanding how others are being harmed and how others also have overcome or are doing that work of overcoming, that can inform us in our own journey, and can inform us
That's very
and can
important.
inform us
Yeah.
in our own work.
Having that out there, putting that out, those examples out there for people to see is so important. And I, for one, I love social media. I was a kid, like babies, the TV was my babysitter. And now it's kind of transitioned into adulthood, into this, I'm on social media and I consume a lot of social media. And I think that it's a good thing. I know there's a lot of controversy, obviously. It's whatever you make of it. But I believe in the power of social media to make progressive change.
Mhm.
And I wanted to know what your views are on social media and how you manage your content on social media. And does your work extend beyond social media?
Those are all great questions. These are like questions that people don't always ask me. I love these questions. So first of all, in terms of extending beyond social media, yeah, I do. I've led workshops. I have speak. I've been invited get invited regularly to speak. COVID kind of has changed some of that a little bit, like the medium. I think that I think I just got an invite for my first in-person speaking engagement since the pandemic happened for February. So we'll see how we'll see how it goes. But I've been doing a lot. So it's not social media, but it's still online. I've been doing like Zoom and that type of thing a lot over the past year and a half. I recently relocated to Chicago. So I used to live in Missouri, used to live in Southwest Missouri, and relocated to Chicago literally like literally right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so it's kind of been interesting that, getting involved with things. And so I'm excited because there's been some opportunities that have opened up for me to be able to really be part of the community, part of some of the activist community here, and to sit back and to learn. Chicago is one of those cities that, like, people say that you can't really call yourself a Chicagoan until you've been here for like 20 years. And like, Chicagoans is like, I feel like, because I never really watched this show, but I feel like it was Sex in the City where the main character said something like, oh, the story, like the city has like 1,000 stories and like whatever. That feel like that was the intro to that. I'm talking about New York City. Well, Chicago is like that too. And Chicago, I love this place. It's so awesome. I'm so happy that I moved here. But I'm not like God's gift to anything or anybody here. So it's really been it's really been a really great experience to sit back and to listen and to learn about the different things, the different issues that are affecting the community. And I've taken part in some protests and different things since I've been here. In fact, like I hadn't even been here for a full week, and I was like already, participating in protests and everything because of the George Floyd deal. But yeah, so I do that sort of thing. That is offline technically, even though sometimes it takes place over Zoom in the pandemic. But then also online, I have a Patreon that I do some teaching and do some writing and share some things that I don't necessarily share on my social media. But my approach to social media, I think that social media has the power to do good. I've seen the power, I've experienced myself the power of social media, of being on there every single day, talking about issues. I've seen myself become more informed about things that I would have had no idea of, that I would have had no idea, or that I would have been even afraid to be like, oh, can we really think like this? So it's challenging. It's mutually beneficial, at least for me. It's mutually beneficial. But then the other thing too is, over the years, because I've been on social media. I mean, I was been on social media since social media was like a thing. Again, I'm 36 years old, so I graduated high school a year after Mark Zuckerberg. Whenever I was in college, my college was one of the first rounds of colleges, or I guess maybe the second round, but the first year that Facebook was like a thing. Some of my friends had it the first semester in 2004. I had it the next semester of the 2004-2005 school year. I've been in these streets. I mean, Zanga, MySpace, like there's a lot of like of that old school stuff that if I wasn't on it, I was aware of it. So I've been out here and been talking about race, whatever, for a long time, on these websites and apps. And so I see the good, I see the power. I've had so many people over the years tell me that I've opened their eyes, so I've opened their perspectives. And that's people that like I know, not just people that's out there like on the internet, but real people that I know, like flesh and blood people that like I've been to their house, I've sat at their dinner table, that type of stuff. So I see the power. But you know what? I can't help but also say that, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've also seen like the terrible side of social media. We've seen
Right.
the I remember whenever Facebook was, the most annoying thing on Facebook was somebody lost a sheep on Farmville, and they were going to have
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I
and
remember
you're going
those.
to get 50 notifications. Like somebody played, like the most annoying thing was the people who played Farmville, and they were asking for sheep, they were asking for corn, they was asking for all this other stuff. They helped me to do this and playing Mafia Wars. I remember whenever that was, and then of course some racism toward Barack Obama thrown in there for good measure. But I mean, I remember when that was like the most persistently annoying thing, and I've watched it over the years. It started with Barack, and it got worse. It started with the whole Barack as a Muslim thing, and it has gotten worse and worse and worse. I remember whenever anti-vaxxers were like the minority, it was like this weird minority kind of conspiracy, and people were like,
and now
why
on
wouldn't
social
you
media
vaccinate
it
your kids?
appears like it's the majority, and it's
Yes.
blown up, and these negative, nefarious groups are getting blown up on social media. But I don't think, in my opinion, that that's really representative.
When somebody hears you, do you want them to go out and hit the streets and become an activist, or you help, or trying to get them to think? What kind of reaction are you looking for when you post provocative stuff?
Yes, another great question. So I would say that it's multifaceted. I really believe that the work of activism, the work of anti-racism, the work of anti-bigotry, I guess, to put it in kind of a bigger umbrella term that encompasses a lot of different things, anti-bigotry, anti-oppression, that sort of thing. There are a lot of different ways to do this work, and not everybody is going to be a person that is literally out in the street protesting. Something that I've been in a lot of different rooms, I've seen a lot of different things, and something that I see is that like there are different lanes, and if I can use the phrase of even like calling, there are different things that people are called and are drawn to, and it's all should be mutually beneficial, and we really should be working together a lot more than what we do. So like people who are community organizers often don't see beyond their street corner, because they're like, you need to be out here in the streets in the whatever, and that's when I don't want to pick on community organizers. I don't want to pick on that. That is so important, and it's so needed. But there's also a need for people who are academics, for people who are creating theory, who are interacting with theory, who are having those ivory tower type of discussions. In my neighborhood, there is a mural that says something like "Study is a centerpiece of organizing," and I love, every time I pass that, I love that, because I'm like, yes, it doesn't have to just be organizing. It doesn't have to just be, like, we need that. We need the action. That's what activism is. One of the root words of that is action, activism. There's got to be some sort of action with it. But not every single person is able to do that. Not every single person has the capacity to do that. But there are people who can be academics. There are people who can be educators. There are people who can be public intellectuals, public dissenters. There's a whole
there are people who are artists who
they're artists, yes. There's artists, there's filmmakers, there's people who are there who could create documentaries, there's people who write protest songs. I have a couple good friends who write protest songs. That's their contribution to the work right now. There's people who create all sorts of wonderful art, of wonderful things that provoke us and to help us think. And we need all of it. We need media, we need social media, we need all that. So the reason why I bring that up then to answer the question, that whenever I post something that might be a little bit provocative, that might be a little bit whatever, people say that I don't necessarily like try to be provocative. Sometimes I think things, I'm like, oh yeah,
that's your lived
probably,
experience.
That's just right. It's just my lived experience. Or there's things that's kind of like, you know what? Like, I'm sure that this is a thought, and I'm sure that it will upset some people. But it's like, but this is something maybe that needs.
It's your thought, and it's needed.
And it comes out, right?
Necessary to for people to be exposed to that.
And so, yeah, so like I think of like, so whenever I think of like what they would do then to respond to that, I realize that, some people, it's going, if anything, it makes people think. But I hope that beyond making people think, it makes it just think like, oh wow, I thought that thought, and wow, I feel upset about it, or I feel mad about it. I hope that people will, it'll spur people to deeper self-examination, and then as they get to deeper self-examination, maybe that person who, maybe that Black woman who reads something that's like, wow, that gives voice to my experience, and they're a professor at a university somewhere, and they're like, okay, wow, this place is really racist, like I need to go, and I need to go to like my provost or my dean or whatever, and lodge a complaint. Maybe the person who's working on an assembly line in a factory, they read something that I've said, and they're like, wait a minute, like, I know that she's talking about racism, but like, this capitalist that runs my plant, that runs the place I'm working at, they are way richer than I am, and I'm working an hourly wage. And maybe we don't have a union. Maybe we should have a union at this place. Maybe maybe we should have a union. Maybe the person that's working at the convenience store is like, yeah, there should be like a convenience store workers union at my place, and they organize, and because they realize that they're being oppressed in that way. Maybe somebody hears it and they are here on the south side of Chicago, and they see the disparities and the inequities between their school that their kids go to and some of the schools on the north side. And there's something that I say that's really provocative to them that gets them to be like, my kids need a better education. So I'm going to run for my school's parent representative. I'm going to work, and I'm going to whatever. And they work their way up, and they're a school board member, or they work their way up and they're an alder person, or what they work their way up. They're in government. They work their way through, and they're radicals and dissenters, and are like, let's burn stuff down. Not saying that like every person that does that, like I can take credit for that, but just saying that it's like, knows, I'm sure that it's not just me, but saying that I feel like that they're all that to say, maybe that's a long-winded way of saying that I hope that whatever the thing is that is right for you to do, that that you feel that sense of, I should be writing music about this moment. She brought up something that was historical. I need to research that. Oh my goodness, that would make a good documentary. Or, oh my goodness, that would make a good book. And somebody writes a book about this historical figure or this historical person that then becomes a hit Broadway musical that then influences a bunch of stuff. Like,
so what I'm getting from you is like, maybe you're hoping you want to be like that spark, that first, that kindling to some other fire somewhere.
Yes.
Who inspires you? Like, we talked a little bit about your faith, but do you have activist heroes? People that either you've worked with personally, or maybe figures that you look upon as somebody who you after a little bit?
Yeah, so I would have to say that hands down, that person for me would be Ella Baker. It's been a while since I have visited her. I've been meaning to visit her, to visit her some. Ella Baker, if you don't know who she is, she was really the brains behind a lot of the civil rights movement. She's kind of an unsung hero and kind of erased from the civil rights movement. She worked for years with the NAACP. She actually knew and worked with W.E.B. Du Bois way back. She was born, I think, after the founding of the NAACP, but as like a young adult and a younger woman, she worked with Rosa Parks. I believe she worked with Rosa Parks and knew Rosa Parks, who also worked with the NAACP in Alabama. She then became she basically ran Dr. King's organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She ran that. a lot of people, she's not really credited for it. A lot of people didn't realize how much that she did, because there was a lot of, because even within the civil rights movement, there was a lot of homophobia, and there was a lot of patriarchy. And so like some of the two people, Bayard Rustin, who was gay, he had to kind of take a back seat in the movement, but him and her, they were the ones that gave birth to the SCLC. And then King was brought into the SCLC and was the face of it, but she was the one literally in the office running the thing. She was also responsible for SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which gave birth to John Lewis, Representative John Lewis. He was part of SNCC. I think he even became a president of SNCC after another famous person, Stokely Carmichael, or Kwame Ture, as he was known, whenever he moved away. So that inspired a whole other like generation. So she inspired like multiple. So she died in 1987, I think it was. Maybe before that, I can't remember what year she died. But she died in the 80s sometimes, and she was born in the 19-teens. And so she inspired like 3 or 4 plus generations of activists, like people, like she gave birth to so many different organizations. She was there and responsible for training, for whatever. And so I really see a lot. I read a book about her whenever I was getting my master's degree, called Ella Baker and the Black Freedom Movement by Barbara Ransby, and it completely changed my life. I saw so much of myself in her, and not to compare myself to her because I'm not even anywhere there, but just in how she thought about things, and how she thought, how she talked, what she got into. And something that the last thing I'll say about that is that it was interesting is that whenever Dr. King was alive, she actually didn't get along with him very well. She was actually very frustrated with him. She ran his organization, but she was actually very frustrated with him, because he was kind of the face, right, of everything. But there were like things within the organization that needed to be taken care of, that she was concerned with like movement building and sustainability. And so they butted heads at times. But I think that she probably sharpened him more than she actually knew. But yeah, so she's somebody that really I think about. And as I do my work, I try to think like, what would Ella do? What would Ella think in this situation? And I try to think of her and as an ancestor. I mean, she's not. I don't think I'm a direct descendant of her, but I think of her as an ancestor, and really believe that she's there, that she's there in some capacity, helping and guiding, and her wisdom there guiding. So yeah.
That's very interesting. I didn't know about her. I'm definitely gonna read up on her some more.
Meryl, Belisha, did you have any more questions before we go? I think I'm about out of them. This has been a great hour, but we certainly rush to leave if you have more.
Yeah, I think just one last question. Social media, of course, not the friendliest place. How do you consume social media? How do you consume what's going on in the world? I know for myself, I get very frustrated, angry, anxious. Sometimes I have to take long breaks from consuming news and information because everything is just so horrible. How do you consume media? How do you consume the news that you talk about? And how do you take care of your mental health?
Whoo, sheesh. Asking the good questions here, asking the hard-hitting good questions. So how I have used social media has evolved a little bit. I would still say that I'm probably on social media a lot still. Probably I still spend a significant amount of time on social media, but kind of how that time is allocated is a little bit different. excuse me. So I have, in addition to my Facebook page, I actually have like a personal Facebook account that at this point, so like there's a lot of people on there that like I have never met before, but there was kind of a period where it was like, oh hey, I'm adding a bunch of friends, like whatever, okay, cool, which was cool because like I had lost a bunch of friends in talking about racism, a lot of people that I actually knew, so it was kind of great. It was great. Then I had joined a faith-based group that on Facebook that talked about issues of justice and everything. And so then I had kind of acquired a lot of friends and stuff, a lot of Facebook friends and stuff from that, who have become friends, and some of them have even become like chosen family for me in a way. And so a lot of my consumption then has been interacting kind of on my own personal thing, and just like on my personal page, on my personal profile. Like I still will talk about race, I still will do that, but I'd actually created my page. I just sort of felt compelled. I was just sort of like, it wasn't anything like, oh well, I'm just so tired of talking about race here or whatever. And it was just more, I just kind of felt like, I just don't know how to describe it, I just felt compelled to, why don't I start a public page and then move like some of the conversations, some of the things that I'm having, some of the thoughts I'm having about race, why don't I post them there? And so then like the people who are on my friends list who don't want to interact with that, I don't have to then deal with them coming in and like turning my comments into like a complete like just wasteland of like it's just would be horrible. And so I was like, well, let me just to avoid that, I figured like, maybe there'll be 150 people that'll follow me there, and I'll be able to kind of post stuff and it'll be cute or whatever. And then it just within like a couple of months it just started blowing up. Like I get like started out at 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, and it started kind of taking off from there. And so now my personal account, like I pretty much just post pictures of my kids. Right now I am reading Harry Potter for the first time. Like I was like not too old for it, but I thought I was too old for it whenever it first came out. I was just sort of like, I was probably like, I was a target demographic, but I was just sort of like, why am I going to read a book about some little white boy on a broomstick? Like that doesn't like fantasy wasn't really like the genre that I was into. But I have a second grader, and she, for whatever reason, has like just started expressing some interest in Harry Potter. So I was like, okay, well, I want to read it. My husband had read like some of them, but I was like, okay, well, I want to read it before she reads it. Like I want to read it so like I know what it's about. So I know what's in it, and so like maybe if there's not anything that's age appropriate, like we can decide like okay, well this is how we navigate. Because again, I didn't know anything about Harry Potter, so I'm just like there's not anything age inappropriate in it, but I didn't know that, so I was just like let me. I wasn't sure. So it's like he has teenagers at a school, so I had no idea what these books were going to be about. So anyway, I've been reading that. So my friends spurred me on to create a hashtag, because apparently they like reading my reactions to Harry Potter. So I'm like, okay, cool. So like in like the past like probably the past like week or so, or maybe 3 or 4 days or whatever, I've read like the first 3 books, and so everybody's like really super invested in that, and that's like kind of how I consume things. That's kind of where I'm at. Then I get on TikTok and
your reaction posts.
Yes, I have. I have different things. Like I'm on TikTok, and like I scroll, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. Oh my goodness. And then I get on Twitter, and I kind of scroll through that. And Instagram is probably the least one that I scroll through the least, but more so like some of my interaction even has just been, it's been trying to thread the needle of creating content, the social media content, and putting my thoughts and stuff out there. But then like learning kind of what the issues and the topics and the subject of the day, of the times and stuff are. So I kind of use social media to kind of get a pulse for that, and kind of what conversations are people having, and is this something that are the conversations, is this something that I want to weigh in on? Is it something that I want to weigh in on? Is it something that I need to weigh in on? Like, does this conversation need my voice? Does it need my interaction or whatever? And so I kind of, weigh that a little bit. But I also just really have tried to, something that has brought me a lot of peace has been unfollowing people. And so particularly on Facebook, because there's a point where like I really, and it happens sometimes like whenever stuff happens, but I'm noticing like less and less and less, because as I just have started weeding people out, or as people have like started self-selecting themselves out of my Facebook feed by defriending me or whatever, what I've noticed is that like I often like hear about some of this stuff like secondhand. So like there's a couple of things that are like brewing on kind of in Christian social media that that the only posts that I've seen are people talking about it. I've not actually seen the post, and I'm like, okay, this is good. No, I mean I still have some people, because I'm the type of person that I really believe in, and not everybody can do this, but I'm sort of like, you know what, like I'm be your friend until you defriend me. So like I'm gonna keep
Yeah,
doing
I'm
me
the same way.
So like I'm gonna keep doing like I'm gonna keep doing me. So like I'm gonna keep posting my. So it's funny, like I post a picture of my kids, post a picture of my dog, post a picture of whatever, and you'll talk about Harry Potter. All the people that's like, oh hey, likes. Don't make it real with the likes, with the heart, with the reacts, or whatever. But as soon as someone's like, yeah, people out here be racist, then it's like, oh,
and let's get real with some real stuff here, because this is really on my mind right now. Yeah.
And then they quiet. They don't have nothing to say.
Right.
But like, I just but people have self-selected themselves out. But I still get some, occasionally I get some things that are, I'm trying to like find a polite way to say it. I am friends on Facebook with some people who have thoughts and beliefs and live a completely different life than I do. And it is interesting to hear their voices whenever they pop up in my newsfeed, even though there's several of them that I have unfollowed, just for my own peace, to protect my peace. And that was really, when things started to shift for me. That was really whenever things started to shift for me, was when I decided, like, some of these people who just keep on saying like stupid crap all the time, like I'm just gonna unfollow them. I started like, it's like
adding to the conversation. Just
they're just saying stuff, and it's like, and what's so frustrating too is like some people, it's just like after years. So like there's a couple people that somehow they still there, they still hanging on. They like Buzz and Woody and Toy Story on the back of the van, like trying to hang on to the van. I don't know why, but that's my social media is the van, and they're still there, like trying to hang on and get onto it. I don't know why, but there are some people that even after like years, like they will keep saying the same racist stuff that I have talked to them about and have tried to educate them about, and have commented and have engaged in conversation with them about, and have talked about and had conversation on my own page, on my own personal account about, and facilitated conversations about, and they still have chosen to be ignorant. And so after, it's like, if my policy is like, if I snooze you for 30 days, if you come back after 30 days saying some of the same stuff, I'll snooze you again for 30 days. But after about like, a month or two of you still coming back on the same nonsense, I just hit that unfollow button. I'm just like,
like a 3 strikes and you're out.
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm gonna hit the unfollow button. And so that don't stop them, because I mean, they don't know that people unfollow you, right? So that don't stop them from like still being ignorant, and that don't stop them from jumping up on my page on occasion and saying something that's really ignorant. It's like, where did you come from? You popped completely. You ain't said nothing to me in 8 months, and then the minute that I say something
on
you're there.
Topic. Yeah.
This one topic, I struck a nerve. I struck a nerve because I said this and that and the other. I struck a nerve because I said that what your specific church, but just like said something about that you think I'm talking about you, and like I think you're talking about you or your church, and then like all of a sudden you're there and they're in there. So that's really interesting. But anyway, that's probably like way more than you wanted to know about my social media life. But like I said, it's really a trying to thread the needle between being able to like be active on social media and contribute to the conversation, because that's what people expect from me. So being able to contribute to the conversation and think about it, but then also not feeling like I have to do that. Being like, oh, like like people are entitled to my thoughts on everything. Like, no, like I'm a person and I can choose. Like, I'm not
like
beholden to
you
the thing.
want to say something, you have
Yeah.
something to say.
So I do
Go
that.
ahead.
Exactly. So it's kind of, if I feel like I have something to say, then I say it. And then, but then also, so balancing that with like consuming in a way that feels fun and feels carefree and isn't bound to any of that. But then also like keeping an awareness to where like I don't just become blissfully unaware of what is going on in any conversation, and just am out here. So trying to keep aware, but without being so aware. Because there's a point when I just really kind of was like so aware of every like dumb ignorant fringe thing that people were saying, that it really started to kind of like affect my spirit. It was just like, man, this is a bummer. Like I hate it here. But I'm in a good place with it now.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us. You know, we got it because I gotta get back to my kids, them to bed and all that, and we have to go about. But I want to make sure you mentioned you're going to be making a live appearance. We're excited. I hope if you ever make it up to the Northeast, make sure you reach out to us so we can let our local audiences know where and when. But also make sure people know how to find Facebook, your Twitter handle, the podcasts or whatever going on. Please take as much time so our audience can find out how to get a little more Allie Henny in their life.
Yeah, so like I've mentioned in my Facebook page, it's just my name, Allie Henny. You'll see it's like Allie Henny is like a public page. You'll see writer or something like that on it. Click that. Click the like and the follow button, and I'm there. I'm also on Instagram as Allie Henny, just again at Allie Henny, and you can see my Instagram feed that you'll see a lot of different things. You'll see pictures of my house, you'll see pictures of my dog, you'll see a picture. I have a black Jesus that I like decorate, kind of an altar type thing that I decorate different ways. And you'll see me decorating stuff in my house, but also you get to consume some of the media and stuff that I have other places. I'm also on Twitter. My handle on Twitter is at the Armchair Com. The Armchair Com is short for the Armchair Commentary, which is my personal blog that I almost never post to. I keep on being like, yeah, my blog's gonna make a comeback. I've stopped. Like I have all the good intentions in the world of posting to my blog. It just doesn't happen. But you can subscribe to it. So the rare unicorn day that something happens and I'm like, I'm going to put this on my blog post, you'll get the notification to it. You can also subscribe to my Patreon. Again, it's just my name. You can subscribe there. I have some different teachings right now. I am in a series called Anti-Racism Fundamentals, where I'm talking about the 5 Ds of anti-racism. That we've talked about decentering. I still have, I owe my patrons some stuff that I'm working on that I just haven't posted. I haven't posted yet. We're going to be talking about decolonizing. And so you can learn about that. That's going to be going on for the foreseeable future. I mentioned TikTok. I'm on TikTok, the Allie Henny. Because I had to add because I think that somebody already took my name on TikTok. So I had to find a way to do it. So I'm the Allie Henny on TikTok. But let's see, my podcast is called Combing the Roots. I'll hopefully be able to have a season 3, hopefully by the beginning of the year. We'll have to see. I think that's about it.
Allie, thank you so much for coming on. It's been my honor, my pleasure. This was fantastic, a fantastic interview. And everyone, please follow Allie on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and on TikTok.
All right. Thanks a lot. And good night, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks again, everybody, for tuning into Revolution Radio here on the web or on YouTube or on the podcast, wherever you're listening to us. Make sure you click like, that you share this out, that you tell your friends. about Revolution Radio. We're going to come back in 2021 with some great features. We've got one more interview left for the year, so stay tuned. Margaret Kimberly will be coming out very, very soon. And we have a great conversation on the way with her too. So make sure you check us out, www.njrevolutionradio.com. And remember, you can join our editorial board. You can donate. You can become a part of this and help us create real grassroots, independent, anti-capitalist media. Thanks a lot for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you real soon with Margaret Kimberly. Got one more interview coming before the end of the year, I promise you. And then we're going to get into 2021. So thanks a lot again, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on Revolution Radio.